Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome everybody back to another episode of Muzzy Buzz on the weekly live stream. For those of you that are new here, my name is Mort. I'm the co-host of the Magnum Roots and the host of Muzzy Buzz. And today, oops, I'm hearing an echo. 1 second. There we go. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, and we had technical difficulty, but I'm joined by a special guest today. Brother Bashir Ahmed Shah. And actually, this was a last minute thing. And a brother of mine on Twitter referred me to you, actually. And so, just to give a little bit of an intro to you without talking too much for you, Bashir Ahmed Shah is based in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and he is an ex or former Ahmadiyya, and he has come to Islam, and he runs a blog that tries to help other young Ahmadis come to Islam and understand what Ahmadiyya really is. That is the blog right there, Ahmadiyya factcheckblog.com. So make sure you go over there and check him out as well too. Other than that, we will put his Twitter handle and everything in the description down below when the show is over. But with that all that stuff out of the way, one more thing to remember: we have a Patreon, and also for you guys, I have just launched a YouTube membership, which is a new feature in YouTube where if you want to support the channel, you can join and become a member, and there's various tiers. I don't want to bore you with all that, but if you want to support the work, be sure to go ahead and check that out. So with all that boring stuff out of the way, assalamu alaikum, welcome, brother Bashir. How are you doing today?
Assalamu alaikum, brother. I'm doing amazing. I'm happy to be here. Our skies, our air is somewhat unbreathable, but doing okay.
Alhamdulillah. So you know what? Let's cut to the chase because I'm excited about this, and the reason why I'm excited about this is because I've known a lot of Ahmadiyyas, and I know like there's some myth versus fact that a lot of Sunni Muslims have about Ahmadiyya. But one of the interesting things is you may not know. A lot of people may not know this, but there's a famous Ahmadiyya guy, Qasim, and he's a lawyer. He actually grew up with me right in Chicago. Went to the same high school I did, and we went to school together. Yeah, yeah. His sister actually became a Sunni and married a friend of mine.
Get out of here! I never knew that.
Her name was Barira, actually. Yeah, she became a Muslim and she married a friend of mine, and they have so she's living. But point being is that I grew up with him. I know his two other brothers. I know his other brother was in the Marines as well too. His older brother. So I've always had this thing, and I have a few back and forth with him on Twitter about because he always tries to label Sunnis a certain way and say, oh, if you think Ahmadiyyas are the wrong, you could probably be ICE or something like some weird stuff like this, right?
Right.
And point being is, so I wanted to get you on here today and talk about this. So before we get into, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, maybe I don't know if you want to touch on your family, but then basically your life prior to you, leaving Ahmadiyya and becoming a Muslim. Why don't you start off with that?
Absolutely. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I was born as an Ahmadi in Rabwa in I don't want to give the year because of the identity crisis on the internet. But I was born as an Ahmadi in Rabwa, which Rabwa is a word in the Quran that describes where Isa was born, right? Ahmadis flipped it and said, no, that's where he died. And that's how they come up with the theory that he died in India. Now remember that they tell us that our beliefs are ridiculous because we believe that Isa hasn't died yet, but they believe that he lived 90 years after the event of the crucifixion and died in Kashmir. So I was born in Rabwa. My parents brought me to the U.S. when I was just a few months, 4 or 5 months, so I don't remember much of that. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area as an Ahmadi. I was the muezzin of the house. I used to wake up at 4 a.m. Since I was 4, 5, 6 years old. I gave the azan, and I woke everyone up for prayers. And then we read the Quran. After that, we had a local a place of worship that we used to also go to and work. And my dad had a small business. We worked 7 days a week, brother. 7 days a week. Like I tell these kids nowadays, and it was manual labor. This is not an office job. This is not a YouTube gig. This is working in a shop with no air conditioning, no heating. So it's a lot of hard work. So as I was,
they don't know about that struggle. They don't know about it.
Yeah, they don't know about it. I have kids too, brother, and I know no one can be like me. No one can grow up in the conditions that I grew up in. And I wouldn't even recommend it. But I try to get them to work around the house, etc. But
let me talk about that because this is interesting to me. So most people would probably assume that Ahmadis don't really pray as much. They're kind of liberal. They don't. I mean, so practically speaking, relatively, you were from a pretty much what we consider practicing Ahmadiyya household. Yani waking up for Fajr in the morning, then going to the masjid and things like that. And so to talk about that for a second, is that a common thing among Ahmadis to be that to be quote devoted? Is that
no? We're in the small 10%. The other 90 don't care, especially in America. The educated Ahmadis, no way, brother. They're not doing any of this. My dad was giving all of his money away, like literally. Like we lived in the worst neighborhood, in one of the worst socioeconomic deprived areas of the East Bay. So the only area that was worse than ours is Richmond, and that's famous for right.
Yeah.
So I was living in I wouldn't say it was poverty because we had food, but our house leaked every winter, and we worked 7 days a week. We didn't even really have a front door though. Like it was pretty messed up. So as I was 11, 12 years old, I began to question, why am I working 7 days a week? So I was a straight A student, math, English, PE, you name it. I still play a lot of basketball. I'm in my 40s now. I haven't been playing as much because of the virus, but that's like my biggest hobby, you know. But I began to question, why were we in this state of cyclical poverty? Why are we giving all our money away? Why were we not building for ourselves and our local community? Why was our money going to London? I had a problem with that. I questioned it all, and I got told off. So my dad found out in a roundabout way.
So talk about that for a minute. 1 second. So you're saying you're going to London. Like, what is that? Like, they pay to London? Like, they're paying the Queen or what? Who are they paying the money to?
So the Ahmadiyya financial headquarters is in London. All the money gets funneled to London, and then they redistribute. Right? So it's
is it like a wait? Is it possible that you would get any of that money back? Is it like a central bank for you guys, where you would just go ahead and like deposit, and then if they decide to use some money, get a stipend, and they send it back to you?
Yeah, it's a bit more complicated than that. Every country has a national headquarters. So in America, the Ahmadiyya headquarters is in Washington, D.C. All the money goes there. Now, they're not going to tell us what bank they're holding it in or how they're holding it. But from the headquarters in the USA, they send the money to the UK. The UK has a budget for America, and they send it back, right? But this is where the trickery happens. And I'm an accounting professor, so I know how embezzlement works. Once the money goes to the UK and they send it to India, say they send 5 million to India, it's not tracked anymore, right? And we found that they were storing money overseas in the famous Panama Papers. Ahmadiyya was the only nonprofit that showed up. So we showed all this to them and said, why is a nonprofit corporation storing money overseas in Panama? And they put some spin doctor on it and said, oh no, in Pakistan, you know, anytime they're in trouble, they're going to go to the persecution end. They're going to call us ISIS. They're going to call us aggressive and say, well, because of we're being persecuted, we had to store money overseas. But that's just not, it doesn't pass a second round of questions. So that's the answer.
Okay, so as a young child, you started wondering, hey, why am I living in this abject poverty? And I'm seeing all this money my pops is making is going to London, and I'm not seeing a dime of it. So it's not even from a point of being selfish, it's more of like, hey, why can't we eat more things? So that led to something, to the next thing now. Obviously, that probably led to deeper questions about, I mean, I'm sure that probably felt almost cult-like, right? Like, hey, we're giving our money, you can't know where it's going, we might give you some of it back. And so that probably leads you to what would be your probably next questions, right, about the whole movement in itself. Am I correct?
Well, I was told on, and there was a bit more to it. and I was questioning my local president, his lifestyle, and et cetera, because he wasn't even married to an Ahmadi, right? So I was like, how does this make any sense? Why is this guy the president? Well, he's the president because he pays the most. So whoever at the local Jamaat pays the most is going to be in leadership. So I saw that. Plus, I was growing up on the street. I know the angles. You see what I mean? I lived in a bad part of town, and my dad's tire shop was in a worse part of town. So I'm selling tires to drug dealers every day. So I know
the game.
I know the angles. I know all the angles. I know all the prices. I know all the angles. I know what everyone does. So it wasn't getting past me, right? And my dad was big into Dawah. He would stop work and tell Christians Jesus is dead all day. He that was the main thing he did. And as I heard his arguments, I would think in my head, how come he doesn't tell them the Jesus in India theory? You know what I mean? Like, that's not fair to say Jesus is dead, Muslims are wrong, and Christians are wrong, but you never tell them what you believe. You believe he died in India. That's ridiculous. That's over the top ridiculousness, right?
Right. So I don't know. There's like this element of surprise, like, hey, you're wrong, and they're wrong too. He died, but then they kind of like leave you hanging in the loop, like it's thriller. Okay, well, what happened then? Tell me. And then like when you get to the bottom, like, oh man, are you serious? Like it's like it's like, are you for real? Like I'm gonna go back to believe. And I feel like they feel like that because like if you tell them right away that hey, he died in India. They're like, are you for real? Like, no, there's no historicity around that at all. Like, we know Jesus didn't go to India at all. Like, it didn't make sense for them, right? So everybody, I mean, even the most basic Christian Muslim would be like, well, I'm not buying that so much. But so by the way, talk about a little bit about what it means to get told on. Like, and I know that I'm assuming that because of even in Pakistan and other areas, and Ahmadis being a small community, I'm assuming that they're very close knit and that they're very a tight knit circle. And so being ostracized from that community is probably a big thing because obviously you're not accepted into a larger community of the Sunni Muslims. You're not accepted by anybody else, so you're already dependent on the community you have, and then being forced out by them, probably economically and just even socially, is probably a big deal. Am I right?
Yeah. So let me explain. And before I explain, Jesus in India goes deeper than that. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad found a grave, brother. There was a grave of a famous Buddhist, the son of a Buddhist prince, Yuz Asa. And he said that is actually Isa's grave, right? And then have you heard of the city in Pakistan called Murray?
Yes. I think in the mountain areas, right? In the mountains or something?
After Mirza Ghulam Ahmad died, Ahmadiyya spin doctors said that Mary, Jesus' mom, died in Murray.
And that's why it's called Murray?
And that's not true. I looked it up. When the British were in British India, they created that whole area of Murray. It was an army locale. They built a church there for the Catholics who were in the military. So, brother, it goes deeper. I could talk for hours about just that thing. So, okay, let's get back to the topic. So, I was told on by a close family member. He told my dad, your son just admitted to me that he's against the local president. So my dad began to persecute me. In fact, brother, they tied me up. And I ain't never been tied up in my life after. And it was crazy, brother, the way they treated me like a redhead stepchild. So the community.
Wait, what do you mean it tied you up, bro? Like it tied you up in a basement or something? Like what? Were they like trying to like deprive you of food or something? Like what were they doing?
No. So I was at my dad's a tire shop. They tied my hands behind my back and put me in the back seat of the car and took me home.
Wow, I'm not laughing at you, but I'm like thinking like, God, the reason I'm laughing, I'm laughing, bro, is because you always hear, oh, the Ahmadis are persecuted, all these violent Muslims out there, they want to come get you. And here you are, like handcuffing your own son with a rope, you know what I mean?
Just because I asked the question. So this was, I knew something was up. But brother, it was 1991. There's no Google. Like how could I know? And then, how could I know what this is about? At that point in time, there were 2 books of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad in English. I don't even know who he is. All I know is what they tell me. So I'd show up and I'd walk out of their meetings. I'd pretend to go to the bathroom. I'd grab a football. I'd be out back playing football, playing basketball. I'd dip out, not involved, right? So I had a lot of resentment from all the local entities. Why doesn't he care? So there was a lot of child abuse, brother. Like they abused me, like you would not believe it. I mean, I used to tell my other cousins, my family tried to kill me, and they're like, "What do you mean they tried to kill? What? They tried to turn me into a monster, right? As you know, if you have a kid and you beat him every day, he's going to be violent, and that could lead him to go to jail, and that could lead him to do all these other things, right? And I had another brother who also was questioning, like me, and they didn't go to the extent that they did with me, but they basically tried to ruin him, and they succeeded. So I was able to get through it. And I think of the Quran, like I didn't even know what the Quran meant, but like back then, but only Allah guides. But brother, and I have to believe, you know, I'm a football player, a basketball player, a baseball player. I can take a lot of punishment. No. You know what I mean? And I think Allah made me like this too, because He knew.
Alhamdulillah, bro. No, for me, I can't understand that. Like, you know, putting that kind of pressure on a child, like, you know, just for asking a question. It wasn't even like you're being disrespectful or like coming out with, you know, like using vulgarity. Or a question is something that's natural. Anyone who has children knows that, you know, children will always ask questions. Like that's what they do, right? And it's your job as a parent to deal with those questions. Right, you never want to have.
In Ahmadiyya, you cannot question the Khalifa, and you cannot question the local president because he's a representative of the Khalifa. So that's how they look at it. And if you question the Khalifa, they'll slander you and call you a Shia, and they'll call you like a Ahmadiyya, which is what I've been called as someone who questions the Khalifa. So it goes deeper.
So let's say that's Muawiyah, basically like Muawiyah. So let's say you're a wow. So they actually use the Shiite argument against the Sunnis. Oh wow. Oh wow. Like
yeah, brother. And brother, remember, I'm a straight A student. I wake up at 4 a.m. every day. No one has to wake me up. Even to this day, brother. Right? I'm a hard worker. I would go to work. And my dad never worked. I tell my kids now, you guys, I got to ask you to clean up. When I was around, my dad, he never lifted a pen off of the table. I did everything for him, from the paperwork to the manual labor to whatever you could ever ask for. I did it. I used to wake up so much at 4 a.m. I became a paper boy and got a paper route because I said I'm already up. And then I couldn't go back to sleep. So everyone would go back to sleep at about 6 a.m. and sleep till 7 or 8. I couldn't. So I'd go in and I'd read the newspaper. I was always a bookworm, right? But Google didn't exist. That's another thing. These kids have Google, they don't even use it.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, that to me is also an interesting thing too, because I mean, for someone who wants to research something about the truth, back in the 90s, there wasn't much. Like you had maybe a page in the Encyclopedia Britannica about something. Maybe if you were lucky enough to have Microsoft Encarta, maybe you might find a page on that. You know what I mean? Right. But other than that, like you really had to go to a library and you had to talk to somebody that had knowledge about something and listen to I remember scrambling to get cassette tapes, you know, for different lectures of different speakers and trying to listen to stuff. That's how we got put on to people like, you know, Imam Siraj Wahaj and Hamza Yusuf, because they had put out these materials. But so you were essentially questioned, and you were basically, somebody ratted you out for asking a question. And so now your father is being aggressive towards you, and your family is obviously looking at you with suspicion. So what happens from that point? Did you kind of just lay low for a little bit and then just kind of go along because you were younger? I mean, to talk about that. What happened after that?
Sure. So, and it was a little bit more than that. It was full-on persecution. I got blamed for everything under the sun, the child abuse. I'd say. But by the time I was 13 or 14, by the time I was 14, it ended. But by the time I was 13, my older brothers couldn't fight. Like I put them down, even though like one of them was like a man. He was like 17, 18 years old. I'm 13. I was in karate school too, so I knew, right? So they began to leave me alone by 14, but I laid low. I said, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I shouldn't have questioned it. I don't know what it is. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I'm wrong. My dad's right. My family's right. I'll just leave it alone. I won't say a thing. I'm not. I still didn't do any speeches for him. I didn't do anything for him. And I graduated high school in '97. And that summer, I worked for my dad, and I started asking questions about the business. Am I a business partner? Do I get paid? I've never gotten paid to this date. I've been working 11, 12 years. Um, I grew up on rap music, on NWA, and Ice Cube. He had that famous diss song, "No Vaseline." So I knew how people get robbed, right? So I was 18, and I just said, okay, so what am I doing here? Because I'm free to go. Before I was 18, I wasn't free to go. Now I can just walk off, and legally you can't do anything, right? I didn't want to be a runaway, so my dad lost a few of his businesses because he trusted the wrong people, and I saw an opportunity, and I said, either you pay me $5 a day, I was willing to take five, or give me my walking papers. So he said, no, I'll think about it. Like, he wouldn't even let me walk away. So I said, okay. So a week later, I asked him again. He said, okay, but you're cut off forever. And forever.
So wait, he's gonna pay you, but he's gonna cut you off like what?
No, so he said he wouldn't pay me even a penny. Or a nickel.
So he said, okay,
I'm not gonna make you a business partner. You just work for me as long as I tell you. And I'm never gonna pay you. Just shut up and do what you're told. And I said, okay, I need my walking papers. And he agreed to it. He said, okay, but from here on out, you're cut off. You're never gonna be a part of me and us, and that's the penalty you're gonna have to pay. And I don't think he said it like that, written out, but that was the sentiment.
It was implied, pretty much, that hey,
right,
you're cutting yourself off right now. Right.
And I had brothers who had left and came back, and it was all love. You see what I mean? It wasn't, but with me, it was like so. I saw.
I'm sorry. So when they left and came back, was that more just like a rebellion of not being religious and then coming back, or was it a leaving of because they questioned and then came back? Because I think
they had a problem with the family business and how it was going, and ran away from home and rebelled against the system of and honestly, the problem was my dad didn't take care of business. He had 3 sons. He should have bought. He had 5 children. He should have bought 5 houses. You see what I mean?
Right.
He should have set up 5 children. Brother, that's in the Sunnah. That's in the Quran and the Sunnah. It's the first thing you're supposed to do. Instead, where did the bulk of his money go? You see what I mean? They got it. It got sent to London. So he didn't handle business, and we had to pay for it. So I walked away.
Basically, what's happening is you see like your father turning over some good cash here, but you don't know where it's going. Everyone's living in poverty. I mean, I'm assuming if you have 3 or 4 different businesses running at the same time, I've been a business owner a long time in my life, and it's not easy. I mean, if you have multiple businesses, I mean, you're doing something right along the business lines, right? So, I mean, you're seeing money turn over, so you're probably thinking like, wait a minute, I'm working here. I can just do simple math in my head, and I know we're pulling in X amount of dollars a month. Multiply that by whatever time business you have, and then you're thinking like, okay, but we should be living kind of comfortably. Maybe not super rich, but we should be living comfortably.
We should at least fix our roof. But I just want to go roof. Look.
Can I get a front door? Can I get a front door, man?
I wasn't even asking for a lot. I was just asking for some basics. Even now, I have 4 ties. 5 ties. I'm working on my shoe game, my wardrobe game. I'm getting around to it. So I was just asking for some basics, some time off. I never had a summer off until maybe I was 19 and I was still working. So So I just.
But is that expected of typical Ahmadis? Like, you know what you just slave and give the money over and you keep doing. I mean, I'm trying to understand it from their view. I mean, I can understand that they're them being a minority, they need all the dollars they can get to keep because they have huge missionaries. Like, I know they have this huge school in like Canada, in Toronto, somewhere over there, where they have like this whole like program. I think the Ahmadiyya course where like they send people there to do missionary work, and they're a lot like Christians in a way where they send people not only into America but to Africa, to like Asia, all over Asia. I mean, everywhere I've been, there's like an Ahmadi like center somewhere. But aside from that, I want to ask you one additional question. It's in my head right now. I remember back in the 1990s, I was in high school. You graduated in 97, I graduated in 98, so we about the same age. Okay, so you like my brother, so my older brother. But I remember around that time in like maybe 95, 96-ish, I remember the Ahmadiyya community, if I heard correctly at the time, they were actually advising committees in Congress about Sunni Muslims saying that, hey, these guys are like terrorists, they're extremists, you gotta watch out for them. And I heard like that, I don't know if it's true, but that a lot of the watching and spying that the CBE stuff and all that happened because of testimonies from Ahmadi that were coming to and working with the Congress, and congressional hearings. And I knew about that because I used to follow a guy named Nazim Haqqani, who he himself as a Sufi took a page out of the book of the Ahmadis and did that same thing. He went in front of Congress and said, 90% of Sunni mosques in America are Wahhabis and Salafis, and they want to just blow up stuff, right? And so let me ask you about that, because in my community in Chicago, there was a mosque that got built within like 30 days and it's massive, bro. I'm talking about like, bro, I never think, it took us years to get a masjid that size. And then people are like, yep, like these people are getting paid by somebody. And so I wanted to ask you about that. Is there any truth to that? Did you ever hear of like, trying to make those political ties that would get them favors or maybe information and spying on other kind of Muslim communities? Do you know anything about that?
Absolutely, brother. I've written 1,600 essays on my blog, Ahmadiyya Fact Check blog. I've covered this. Ahmadiyya is a holdover from British colonialism, right? They got access to British Africa after World War I, during World War I, during World War II, all the British colonies, Ahmadis got access. They were able to start schools. They were able to start hospitals with government funding. In British India, the British military built an air pilot training center at Qadian, which is unprecedented. There was no pilot training center outside of the UK in the world. It was in Qadian. They built a train. They spent £1 million and built a train line from Batala to Qadian just for Ahmadis. Ahmadis have been, I've written an essay, the Mirza family was above the law in British India. Every time he went to court, he won the case. Even when he was guilty, he won on appeal. He was their guy. His dad fought for them in the 1857 War of Independence. He helped kill Muslims. They gave him a pension for doing that. So Zafrullah Khan was the foreign minister of Pakistan installed by the British. Then he got a job at the United Nations in New York, right? Qasim Rashid is trying to be a congressman in Virginia. This is what they do, brother. They manipulate governments. They won. If they were on the side of the French, so they didn't get access to French Africa or Portuguese Africa. It was British Africa. So their political ties run deep. In 2008, there was that person who was a Muslim mega donor who gave $1 million to the Hillary Clinton. He was an Ahmadi, Kareem Ahmed. Actually, it was 2012, and then he got investigated for manslaughter. Brother, they're playing these games. They've been playing them for over 100 years. They want their own government. They almost got Kashmir in 1931. In the Gambia, in the 1960s, the first governor general of the Gambia was an Ahmadi.
So repeat that point for me. So people, by the way, real quickly, Jazakumullah khair, SN Smith and everybody else who are doing the super chat, we appreciate it. If you have any comments, make sure any questions, let us know so we can get the brother to answer them. But with that being said, Wait, so if I'm understanding you correctly, the Ahmadiyya movement is an extension of British colonialism. That's what you said, just to be clear.
Absolutely.
And that's interesting because I heard, and I think I read at one point that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad actually passed a fatwa saying it was haram for Muslims to fight against British occupation in India at that time. And mind you, for those of you that do not know, India produced wealthy Muslim nations, or kingdoms. Like, just to give you an idea, the second richest man in the history of the world came out of Muslim India. The Nizam of Hyderabad was the second richest man in the history of the world. And I mean, so for those of you that don't know, when Britain came to India in the 1700s under Aurangzeb, when he was the Mughal ruler, India represented 26% of the world GDP.
GDP, yeah.
By the time the East India Company got done in 1947 with India, with Lord Mountbatten, when they finally signed the papers, India was less than 1% of the world GDP. Can you imagine that? They went from a nation that used to export textiles and goods, everything like that, to a nation that began exporting.
It was sugar and opium were the main things.
Spices, yes, saffron, sugar, rice, you name it. I mean, they were making handmade items. Yeah.
And remember, in Europe, sugar doesn't grow.
You can't. They don't have the climate for it. They can't grow rice and sugar. Right. So what I'm saying is that so essentially people like this are who they were defending, and they basically what they were doing was they were licking the boots. Like, we say in America, they was chilling in the master's house, right? They were there, right? Right. That's what they were doing, right? They got comfortable, and so the master gave them some extra gratitude. They said, okay, here's some benefit. Yeah. So they went off to places like China and South Africa, and they went to Kenya, Zimbabwe. I mean, and even I'm sure places in South America as well too. They went off to, so that now.
Let me just stop you. Ahmadiyya has never gotten access to China. It's a communist republic. They don't get access to communist countries. See what I mean? And so they never got access to China, even to this day. In Russia, they've started something, but if you're communist like Cuba, Venezuela, they'll never get access. Ahmadiyya.
All right, I got you. Okay, so if people don't give treatment to any kind of, if there's no class warfare essentially happening.
It's capitalism, free market, where they regulated religion and made it a business that anyone can operate. They will show up just like the Baha'is, just like Scientology, just like the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses, and run their business, right? In the Mughal
Empire. That's so interesting, though. That's so interesting. You mentioned Scientology, and someone just put in the thing, like Ahmadiyya sounds a lot like Scientology.
It absolutely is. But see, the Scientologists don't use the Bible. They don't use the Quran. Ahmadis go and twist the Quran and offend everyone with their dawah and start all this trouble, and then they cry persecution. So remember, in Ahmadiyya, religious freedom is not religious freedom of practice. It's the ability to give dawah. And we call it tabligh. So in fact, their definition of religious freedom is different.
How do they define it? I mean, essentially, so let me ask you this. If there was a potential Ahmadiyya state, would I allow it to be like a Sunni or a Muslim and just practice what I want to practice, or would that be different?
They would never allow it. They would just look at Rabwa. In Rabwa, there's like one Sunni mosque, and that's at the train station, which is the only part of that city that's owned by the government. But they have allowed Christians into the city. And I think there's like a Baha'i place of worship, but just one, and there's no adherence. It's for show. It's like a for-profit college, and they got all these plaques on them, but really there's nothing going on, right?
Okay, yeah, because I mean the reason why I asked you that was because we always hear about they say the Sunnis are intolerant. They don't understand the spirit of Islam, and they always want to persecute us and oppress us. And every time some Islamophobe comes up, they always say, "Well, look at the like for example, there's an apostate by the name of Haris Sultan. He always goes, oh, the Ahmadis are the most oppressed people in Pakistan. They're always being oppressed." And I'm not denying that there is some treatment of them. I mean, maybe innocent Ahmadis that are being victims of violence. And I don't advocate that. But would you say that that Ahmadis, if they were in power, would they be, I mean, any different than, than these brutal regimes that would treat them any differently right now? I mean, would they be any different?
Well, it's a totalitarian regime. If they ever had power, the Khalifa would be in charge. And maybe they'd come up with a creative way to say, okay, you can be a Muslim, but we're going to boycott you and economically deprive you and put you in a position, so maybe they'd come up with so they would never admit to it. There wouldn't be any free press, so we wouldn't know anyway. Right. Right. So, even today, there's no free press in Ahmadiyya. You have to get approval to do anything, even to debate on the internet. You have to have approval from the Khalifa. He does not allow the average Ahmadi to have a debate about the prophethood of Mirza Muhammad or any other issue. So,
and that kind of makes sense because they're probably worried that, hey, if you don't, like, I mean, if the person's not smart enough in the arguments of trickery, the trickery arguments, like the truth manifests itself. I mean, I've debated many Ahmadis online about, especially like, and I want to get into this too, like some of the major evidences they use, for example, the ayah, ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين, the whole issue of خاتم النبوة, like that argument is always something they try to twist. And what I've noticed is once you explain to them that the linguistics of the Arabic language, and they get over that ignorance, a lot of these arguments just crumble. Like right. they don't make sense anymore. You can't, in good faith, actually still believe that unless you have some other motive, like monetary benefit or cultural ties or whatever it may be. But if you're really genuinely looking for the truth, when you hear the actual Sunni response and the understanding behind it, it's not even a compliment. It just demolishes the argument. So tell us a little bit about your experience about it, because I'm sure you began to then, well, how about before we get there, why don't you talk about how you came to Sunni Islam? Because I've known some Ahmadis who just completely left Ahmadiyya and became a Hindu. So I forget this, all of Islam is whatever. Right? I think you know who I'm talking about, right? Yeah. Yeah, I used to know him while he was a Salafi, and like so I've known him, but I've seen others too, like on the internet, that have become that way. But I mean, so you came to Sunni Islam, and I want to know how that happened, because I'm sure you had a negative taste in your thought in your mind about Sunnis too, because they probably taught you that Sunnis just want to kill you, they're radical, they blah 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 blah. So talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely, brother. So in 2003 and 2004. The Ahmadiyya spin doctors in 99 to 02, I was in the United States Air Force. I was traveling the world. I met Muslims. I was told to never pray in a masjid, never pray behind. You could go into a masjid, pray separately, and get out. So that's what I was doing, right? You know what? I think I went once or twice, and I was like, I just won't even go, right? Because that's weird to me. Who does that? Who says I'm going to pray separately? It's disrespectful, right? So I think I almost was going to do it in boot camp, and I just left altogether. I couldn't do it. So I was in the United States Air Force. 9/11 happened. So you mentioned Qasim Rashid's brother. He says he's a Marine. He never deployed. I think he worked I don't even know what job he did. I fixed airplanes, high-tech aircraft, B-52s, U-2s, KC-10. I read Boeing manuals. These were hard schematic diagrams. Like, you really got to be sharp and remember, and troubleshooting. It's like troubleshooting a human. Someone comes in with a cold, who's fast, right? So 9/11 happened, and in the Ahmadiyya world, they were claiming 200 million converts, brother, in a 3-year period. 200 million people converted to Ahmadiyya. It was all a lie. Later on, I found out it was all a lie. They claimed 40 million converts from India alone in 2001, right? So I was an Ahmadi still, probably non-practical. I think I went to Jummah a few times in uniform even, but I didn't, so I joined the Air Force when I was 19. I stopped working for my dad when I was 18. I worked at an auto shop for a year, joined the U.S. Air Force, was told to never pray but behind any Muslims, got stationed at home. I got stationed in the Bay Area, which was impossible to happen, but I did. And then 9/11 happened. Muslims are considered the worst, right? I'm dealing with a lot of racism in the military. even before there was a lot of racism. Now it's times a million. Everyone's on my helmet. Everyone's on my head. I was ready to fight. So, I wasn't backing down.
So hold on, let's talk about that for a minute, because a lot of people don't know. Because I have some relatives in the military too, but they were done with service prior to 9/11. I mean, I have a cousin right now that's still either he's a Marine, but he's a surgeon. Like he's not really combat, like not really around that. But the other ones are retired. But talk about that for a moment. What was it like being? I mean, because the way I view it is like this. I've seen Ahmadis when they try to go into the military or in civil service, they try the hardest to blend in. Like meaning that hey, we're just like you guys. We're about this, we're about that. But I know that Muslims sometimes we can't compromise on certain things, right? We're not gonna just say, oh yeah, it's cool to say Merry Christmas to you, bro. You know what I mean? We just don't get down like that, right? It's just not our thing. And we're not just gonna have a beer with you because it's cool. You know what I mean? Like we're not. I mean, but I mean, so what was that like for you? I mean, I'm sure because you were also practicing Ahmadi, so I'm sure at one point, so you probably had some morals put into you that, hey, we're not going to behave a certain way, right? Because you did have a proper upbringing in the sense, and I'm sure that Ahmadi probably believed in not eating pork and drinking alcohol and things like that, right? So you probably lived that kind of lifestyle. So how was that being in the military as a Muslim and compare that to post 9/11? Like, was the military, were superior officers being like racist towards you or xenophobic towards you? Like, did you experience that, and was there any outlet for you because of that? I mean, were you able to get over that in the military?
Yeah, so you're right. Amdis do blend in. I was one of the boys, but I wasn't one of the boys. I hung out with the minorities, with the black folks.
Yeah, buddy, because you brown like me, bro. You can't be one of them.
I hung out with the Filipinos and the Hawaiians. And I had a lot of white friends too. I mean, we would be overseas. I had deployed 7 times before 9/11. So I had hung out with everyone in Europe, Guam, Thailand. I went everywhere, brother. I wouldn't say I was fully practicing. I didn't care. I was never home. I was just on the road. No one knew that back then there was no social media. So it was all under the radar. So, I didn't care. Really, I was an amateur, but I didn't care, and everyone knew that. I never ate pork though. You can just forget that because that's right. So, but I wasn't really like a devout Ahmadi, but you know what I mean. I just did whatever I felt like doing. And then they already hated me before 9/11. And plus, I listened to like rap music. I grew up on rap, so they really hated me, especially the guys from the rural areas. They got a problem, right? And
rap is crap.
right. And I could rap a little bit. I grew up in it, so of course I knew how to do it. You know what I mean? So in my dorm room, we'd have like DJ battles and rap battles and etc. Right? I lived the dorm life. So after 9/11, it got really bad. I deployed to an island called Diego Garcia. You ever heard of that island? It's the tip of a dead volcano in the Indian Ocean.
And so is that close to the Maldives?
Exactly. It's about 500 miles south. So that's where they bombed Afghanistan from. And I worked on a lot of those aircraft, the B-1s and the B-52s. I mostly worked the KC-10, which is the in-flight refueler, high-tech in-flight refueler. There's only 56 in the whole world. So, like, they would send me all around the world to fix them because not everyone was qualified to fix it. So I was able to, I went to Hawaii like 15, 20 times. I've been to Alaska. I've been to London. I've been everywhere, right? So
it's like a specialty. It's like a specialty plane with specialty mechanics for it.
Right. And it takes like 2 years to get qualified. It took me like 4 months because I grew up doing auto mechanic stuff. So I was so much better than everyone else. It wasn't even fair, brother. You know what I mean? So like I used that leverage since I knew I was way more talented. I got away with more. You know what I mean? Like you can't really disrespect senior officers. Not the officers, but like the NCOs, the sergeants. But I'd say whatever I want to say. I stayed away from the officers. You know what I mean? But and I was pretty good at brawling. So like guys were kind of scared of me. You know what I mean? I'm not a big guy. I'm like 5'6", but I have a background in karate since I was a kid. I've been abused as a child, so I can take a beating. I'm ready to go, right? So it was different. It was very unique. I'm not like Kasim Rashid's brother, I don't even know what job he did, but there's another guy, there's another Ahmadi who was also in the army, and he posted pictures all over Twitter. I can't remember his name, Mansoor Shams, right? And he was, brother, he was admin. He worked in the office. Like, we looked down on people like that. Like, I had the wrench and the toolbox. My uniform is dirty. I work all day. Some of the officers saw me work and saw the level of work that I did, and they were blown away. No one else was down to get dirty like that. So I had a lot of leverage to be able to do whatever I want. People generally left me alone. I used to tell people, you want to catch the fade, we can go to the gym on base. They got boxing gloves, and we can handle it. That way no one gets in trouble. I was in tip-top shape. So my journey is a little bit different in regards to that. They were more afraid of me than anything. So as I got out of the military, as I got out of the Air Force, I never wanted to stay. Okay, so then the Iraq War happened, and I deployed for that to the UAE. I've been to the UAE like 10 times. The base is close to Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
Al Dhafra Air Base, so I had an opportunity to work on spy planes a little bit here and there. I tinkered.
But this is the 1990s, you mean, or you mean 2003?
2003. 2003.
So were you still Ahmadi at this point, or have you become? Okay.
Yeah. So I went and did the Iraq War. I was 24 years old. And that was wild. Like, we had gas masks, M16, because we were closer. Diego Garcia is a tropical island. There were no security checkpoints. We're so far away, no one's getting to us, right? So that was a different experience. That was fun. The Iraq War is more, I was working 16 hours a day, helping other guys who don't know how to do their job, given my expertise. I was on the phone. People would call me from California and Jersey, and they'd ask me questions. Hey, we have this problem, and I'd gladly answer. Right? There was no social media, so I'm bored out of my mind anyway. So as I come back from there, I'm 24 years old, and and my dad's like, son, you've been running around. No one knows where you've been. No one knows what you're up to. You should get married. And I said, okay, I've had my fun. I've been on the road for 5 years. I'm ready to settle down. I'm tired of, I wasn't home more than 2 months at a time. You know what I mean? So by the end of my career, I deployed like 10 times. I had like 450 days being deployed, broken up. I never went to Afghanistan or Iraq because the aircraft that I fixed are too expensive to be sent there. We're further back. So I decided to go to Rubwa and marry an Ahmadi girl from the other headquarters. And I did that. And as I went to Rubwa, I was shocked. I went to my dad's village also. My dad's village, there's no Ahmadis there at all. My mom's village, there's no Ahmadis there at all. Right? And I saw this, and I'm asking questions. I always ask questions. So I realized that Ahmadis aren't what I was told. Because I walked around Rubwa for a month and a half. I was shocked to see men watching pornography at the internet cafe in Rubwa. And then I asked my cousin about it, and he's like, yeah, it's pretty normal, pretty typical. And then I go to the masjids, and they're empty for fudgers or whatever. And I couldn't understand it. Everyone told me, yeah, no one cares. Right? And I was like, that's not what I was, this is like Mecca. So I'm just blown away. So I get married, and then I start asking my wife, my ex-wife now, do you read the books? Who's Mizagana? She said no. And I was like, but I can't read them. They're in Urdu. We can't. It's not happening, right? You can and you don't. And I was just perplexed. So I got on some discussion boards. So now it's 2005. I'm married. I'm out of the Air Force. I'm working back at the family business. It's now like a tow truck company, right? I'm working 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Are you getting paid at least this time? Or are you getting paid?
Right? But now I'm getting some money, but they're charging me rent. They always charge me rent. Okay, so I forgot to tell you, as I was 18, I stopped working for my dad. He started charging me rent. And that's ridiculous. Now that I think about it, absolutely ridiculous. But he really cut me off, right? So as I got married, to the woman that he chose, I had to pay for the whole wedding. It was like 20, that was like all the money I had. I invested it. This is what I was doing. I got out of the Air Force. I hadn't graduated college yet. So I started reading. And I'm at the house at this point, brother. I got a woman. I got a kid. I'm at the house. I got the tow truck. I don't go out. I don't need to go out. You know, I'm like 26 and I'm reading about Ahmadiyya. And the first thing I read about was the prophethood of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. And I was shocked. Absolutely blown away. I couldn't believe it. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad claimed to be the second coming of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's how he claimed prophethood. So,
I mean, I know
so
that he. Yeah, I know that from what I know, he actually claimed. I mean, the prophethood came like in the final ending, but he did this in stages. Like he first tried to be like a scholar, and then tried like a reviver or whatever it was, and then he just flat out came out and said, "Look, I'm Jesus and the prophet." Like I mean both. Like he just said, forget about the Mahdi, and Jesus is dead. I'm the person. I'm the Mahdi, and I'm the prophet. Right? Is that what it is? He doesn't believe that he's Jesus, or what is that? I always get confused.
Yeah. So it's way complicated, brother. There was a guy in British India named Sir Sayed. He said Jesus is dead before Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He was the big scholar in British India that the British wanted to help them get Muslims to stop rebelling. You see what I mean? And the British didn't want a Muslim to believe that there's a victory at the end. So they wanted to kill the Mahdi concept, the Messiah concept. Sir Sayed comes along and says that Isa is dead. He's never coming back. The Mahdi concept is false, right? Mirza Ghulam Ahmad copy. Where he took it too far. In Brahini Ahmadiyya, 1879, volume 2, he says the words of Allah have not ended. And he quoted chapter 108, not chapter 108, I don't remember the reference, but he quoted a verse of the Quran where it says the words of Allah never end, right? Then he started claiming verses of the Quran for himself. Inna atayna kal kawthar. He says that was revealed to himself.
So how did he justify the fact that these verses are 1,400 years old? Like I mean, did he believe in reincarnation or something? Like what was the whole deal?
Well, so in the Hindu philosophy, they believe in reincarnation. So he was using that and saying that he was the second Muhammad, right? So he didn't say it immediately. He said it 20 years later, but there was a lead up. You see what I mean? He's slowly setting us up. So from the very beginning, he was going to make all these claims. He claimed to have all the verses that were revealed to Muhammad, where the word messenger is used. He said they were revealed to him. So if you look up Surah Jummah, chapter 62, verse 3, وَآخَرِينَ وَمِنْهُمْ, or I must have mispronounced it. He says that's revealed about him being the second coming of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, na'uzubillah, right? So that's where he took it too far. I read about it and was shocked. The Lahorians denied the prophethood of Mirza. And I remember as a kid hearing about them and wondering if we're the best, if Ahmadiyya Muslims are the best, we're the true Islam, why was there a split? And I always had this in my head. Well, now I can read about it. So as I read about it, I'm shocked. And so he set up being Isa. First he said he's married. Then he said I got pregnant. Then he said he gave birth to Isa. And then he said I am Isa.
Wait a minute. The man said he was pregnant?
The man said, and he got into metaphoric talk. He's like, at the time he doesn't say it's metaphoric. 20 years later he says, yeah, it's a metaphor. But he says he was Isa. He says Allah made him Maryam. Allah breathed his ruh into him. Isa was developed and nurtured for 10 months or 9 months, and then he says he gave birth to Isa, and then he says, and then now that's me. So the same way he set that up, he was quoting Surah Kawthar, Inna atayna kal kawthar, saying this is about me. Chapter 48, verse 29. never we sent a messenger. He said that's about me, not about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says it's about me. Chapter 61, verse 6, Ismahu Ahmad, where
من بعد اسمه أحمد. Yeah, it's talking about the Jews. I mean, Musa told his people that there will be a prophet after me whose name shall be Ahmad. Yeah, confirming. Yeah.
So after the split, the Lahorians denied it, and now the Ahmadiyya spin doctors have downplayed it. Nowadays, you won't hear them saying Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is the second coming of Muhammad.
So, a question, real quickly. What is the difference between a Lahori Ahmadi and traditional Ahmadi?
The Lahori Ahmadis were the educated group of Ahmadis. The famous Muhammad Ali, not the boxer. The boxer Muhammad Ali got his name from the Lahori Ahmadi Muhammad Ali, who wrote the famous Quranic commentary of 1917. Right? He was a good man. He knew the Mirza family was bad. He knew Mirza Ghulam Ahmad had never led Salah. Brother, how does that make any sense? He's your imam. He never leads Salah. He never gave a khutbah. He never gave a khutbah. So after he died, they made up stories saying, no, he led Salah once or twice. No, he gave this khutbah. Brother, he barely knew Arabic. He stuttered. He couldn't, I mean, no disrespect, I found the references, we looked it all up. Muhammad Ali knew that his sons were uneducated too. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's sons were just as bad. So they broke away in 1914 and they said Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is not a prophet. He is not the second coming. So they humanized him. Brother, I respect him. I respect them.
So why do they call him Ahmed? Why does he become Sunni?
Because I mean, maybe it would be too embarrassing. So the Lahori Ahmadis connected with the Sunni Ahmadis in British India. They didn't get the colonialism love that the Qadianis got. They didn't get access to British Africa. They didn't get access. They did get access to Germany, the UK. In fact, the biggest mosque in the UK, the most famous and popular, was the Wold King Mosque. The Lahori Ahmadis were running. See what I mean?
So let me understand. So, but essentially, from our perspective, are they like Sunni Muslims? Like they pray 5 times a day, they fast Ramadan, Zakat, Hajj, and all that stuff. They're like the Muslims that we are, but they just call it Lahori Ahmadis.
Right. But they still believe that Mirza. But once they take the prophethood away, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad could be wrong. See what I mean? He could have erred on this.
So they take him as a madhab. Like, okay, maybe his the juristic ruling, whatever, but he's not a prophet. Whereas they probably say that the Ahmadis were like, true Ahmadis, they have overexalted his status, and that so he's actually just a scholar that they overexalted and they made him into a prophet, and so they're wrong. But we still believe that he was a good man, but he wasn't a prophet.
Right. And famous scholars have said they're not out of Islam. The Qadianis are out of Islam, but they said the Lahori Ahmadis, okay, they might be, but they stopped mentioning Mirza Ghulam Ahmad altogether. They've connected with the Sunni community. They're withering away. There's probably 10,000 left in the world. There's barely 100,000 Ahmadis.
Really?
For my research and my estimation, there aren't many, brother.
They are so overrepresented, bro. Every time you go somewhere.
But brother, that's what happened in Pakistan. They were overrepresented in the government, in government jobs. They're overrepresented. In 1974, on May 29th, at the Rugwood train station, Ahmadis attacked a group of teenagers from the Nistar Medical College. They beat them up. That's what led them to be declared non-Muslim, not per law, for the law, for constitution only. So this is where the aggressive tabligh comes in, the aggressive dawah. It's like selling pork. Why are you guys selling pork? Muslims have rejected it. Stop, and then they'll give their argument, their talking point, and not listen to the feedback. They don't want to hear what we believe. Some Ahmadi was on the show the other day. He didn't know the Islamic position on chapter 62, verse 3. وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ. All that means is the non-Arabs can become really good Muslims. That's all it means, brother. It doesn't mean that a Persian prophet is going to come in the future. Who's going to be coming with Muhammad? That's ridiculous. That's over the top.
I have a few more questions about Ahmadi, but I want to know at what point at which you became a Muslim. Like, I mean, when did you begin to? So let's talk about that. So, circa 2006. Now you're back in America. You run a tow truck company. You got a kid and a wife now. You came back to Pakistan. You're living that. You're playing house. No more running around. No more badmashi out there in the streets. You're living that. The family man life. So now, what happens now? So now, I'm assuming you're probably trying to say, "Hey, listen, I went to the Mecca of the Ahmadis, and there's nothing there. It's empty. My wife knows nothing about that stuff." I'm assuming now in your head, you're probably thinking like, "Wait, I got this kid. Do I want to bring him up in this nonsense, or what?" And then, is that what it is? All right, go ahead. You can tell me.
So I'm perplexed on what to do. I go to my family members and I say, "Hey, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad changed his position on prophethood. Like, he said he wasn't a prophet for 20 years, and then the last 6.5 years of his life, he claimed to be a prophet. Do you know about this?" Brother, they almost fired me.
Again?
So, brother, I did the same thing again. I didn't learn my lesson, brother, but there was something. That's why I strongly believe Allah guides people, because there was something in me that would not allow me to stomach this. So I go to my local masjid. I ask the local imam, and he's still working in the LA area, Urshid Mali. I ask him, we're having a meeting, there's like a question and answer session. I say, when did Mirza Ghulam Ahmad change his position on prophethood? Because the Lahorians say he never changed. You guys say he changed in 1901. What's the story? And everyone's dumbfounded. The imam didn't know what I was talking about. His son doesn't know what I'm talking about. My family members are there, jaws drop. They're confused. Why is he asking this question in public? The imam says, "You're not an Ahmadi." I'm like, what are you talking? What are you talking about? And then he ends it, right? So after, I'm like, what happened? How am I not an Ahmadi? So the Ahmadi Murabbis are the ones that I blame. And Qasim Ash's dad is an Ahmadi Murabbi. Remember that?
Yeah. And by the way, the funny thing is that not to throw shade on him, but I specifically remember his dad never being around. Like, he grew up like almost like we thought he never had a dad. Like, he was never around, but his mom was like a single mother to us. Like,
that's how they're raised. That's how they're sent out in Pakistan. All the ones that went to Africa, they were away from their families 4 or 5 years, bro.
What crazy, bro? I mean, I thought Tablighi Jama was crazy at 40 days, but this is like next level stuff, bro. You know what I mean? Like,
so the advance of Qadiani Ahmadi is going to sacrifice everything. And I came from a family who was willing to do that, who was poor and was willing to give everything. And even to this day, they've refinanced people's houses. They've given people housing. Some guy pretended to be an Ahmadi and they refinanced his house and gave him a loan. You know what I mean? So I know all the angles. So I saw it and I was like, "What are you guys doing? This doesn't make any sense." So,
so can you, I don't know if you can see the question there. Do Ahmadis make takfir of non-Ahmadi Muslims?
Yes. But after 1923, they were ordered to do silent takfir. Right. They believe it, but they've been told to not publicly say it. And then when Pakistan came into being and they moved there, they totally ended it. They're like, "We're not going to do it anymore." The Lahori Ahmadis protested because this was also part of the split. The Lahori Ahmadis would not do takfir. The Qadiani Ahmadis say he's the second coming of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have to do takfir. The Quran says any prophet that comes, you have to accept him. They even in their kalama, it's inferred. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is inferred under the word Muhammad.
So I heard about this, that they believe, like now I've heard this too, that they don't shy away from saying that that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is a prophet, but what they say is that Khatam and Khatam, whatever they do, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the last law-bearing prophet, and Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was the one that continues, the prophet. He's not bringing any new Sharia. right? And I've never, and as much as I tried to understand this context, as much as I debated that, they never have a solid answer. Like, there's no concept of a law-bearing prophet, and I mean, either he is a Nabi or a Rasul, right? I mean, a Rasul is that, and there's no, but the Quran is very clear where it says there is no, he is the seal of the prophethood, not of the messengership. The Khatam al-Nabiyyin, right? He is the end of the citizenship. I mean, I'm sorry, the prophethood. So I never understood that point about them. But let me ask you this one thing as well too. So if they were to make takfir of the regular Sunni Muslims, do they? I mean, and now they make takfir of regular Muslims. You know, I guess my question is, how do they rectify the fact that Muslims don't view them as Muslim? Like, I mean, do they just tell you that, hey, we're just kind of lying to everybody right now because we're playing it safe? Is that what, I mean, do they openly know they're lying to everybody? Is that what is understood among them? Like, for a matter of self-preservation?
Yeah, they're very competitive, and I always have this problem. Like, honestly, brother, if I'm playing basketball and there's refs, the refs are in play. But if me and you are playing 21, or we're playing a 3-on-3, and I step out of bounds, and I know it, I'm gonna say, brother, I stepped out. Or if whatever I score, brother, I didn't see it. It happened too quick. I'll tell you the truth. And these are competitive. They're taught to be overly competitive. Never give in. Never say that you're wrong. They just cannot do it. That's the problem. So I'll take it a step further. Their Murabbis are editing their books. In the 2004 edition of Tazkirah, which is a collection of the revelation of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, his revelation where he says that his God told him that those who don't accept him are non-Muslim, they took it out of the next edition. See what I mean? So
are there still older versions available that have that?
I archived it on my blog. The 2004 edition is there. I found the 1976 edition is there. I found the original quote. I went back and did all the academic work to prove it. It's funny how Qasim Rashid called it a clerical error. Like that was his answer algorithmically, I think.
Yes.
They won't admit to it. They just cannot. Like, brother, it's as clear as day. Just admit. But look, some of my family members would see people step out of bounds. They would be looking the opposite way and call someone out of bounds. And I'd say, brother, you weren't even looking. Like, and I'd question him, why are you like this? Why can't you just tell the truth? I'm not asking what you do behind closed doors, but I'm asking you about this religious scripture. Just tell the truth. They can't do it, brother. In fact, they're going back and they're editing their books now. They've been editing them forever, and they're just being overly competitive. And so we just had a question. Ahmadis, they don't believe that Adam was even created in Jannah. They believe that Adam was created on earth. They don't believe that him and Eve traveled from the Jannah through the Samawat to the earth. They don't even believe that. But before we get off track, yeah, brother, they do takfir silently. Personally, I've heard all my family members say non-Ahmadis, and they call them non-Ahmadis instead of Muslims. Now they might say, oh, the Muslims, but normally they say non-Ahmadi Muslims, right? So nowadays, silent takfir.
Right. Okay, good. So I'm glad you were able to get that out of the way. So now let's go back to what we were talking about earlier was how did you come to Islam then? How did you come to, I want to hear that part of it.
Yeah, so I started asking questions. I asked the local imam, and now everyone at the mosque is shunning me. They're calling me a Lahorian. They're like, what is he with us or not? I'm like, I'm just asking questions. What do you mean am I with you? There's these questions on the table. You need to answer them. If you can't, I know you can't answer them because I've looked it up. So I joined all the Ahmadiyya discussion forums. Remember when the discussion forums were the biggest thing on social media? Before Reddit, before Facebook, before Twitter, discussion forums, right? So I was at the Ahmadiyya discussion forums learning and reading and then asking questions. So by 2007, I got in trouble. All of a sudden, I'm not getting a promotion at work. I'm not getting a raise, right? I should be a business partner. I'm not. I want to start my own tow truck business. They're not helping me. Even though I can fix the truck, I can drive the truck, I can do all the paperwork. These types of humans don't exist. A tow truck driver is a ruffian kind of guy, and he sucks at paperwork normally and accounting, right? So I decided to give it up. Brother, I'm going to leave it alone. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to wait till my kids are grown. I'll deal with it when I'm 70, 80 years old. I put it away. I kept doing my research, but I said at a minimum, I'm going to stop praying with them. I'm going to stop doing a Ramadan with them. I'm going to just stop my association with them. I'll show up to the basketball game. I'll show up to the football game, and I'm going to try to show out. You know what I mean? But as far as the religiousness, I'm not going to do it. So they all were upset about this. They were silently calling me non-Muslim. That they were saying he doesn't go to Jummah. If you miss 3 Jummahs, you're not a Muslim, right? So I pointed out, like recently, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad never went to Jummah. Where did he go to Jummah? Where he lived in Qadian, there was no masjid. When he went to Sialkot for 4 years, he never went to a masjid. There's no record of him ever going for congregational prayers. Forget about Jummah. So 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, I just disconnect, stop going. 2012, 2013, I ended up getting a divorce. It's a crazy personal story. So once that happened, I said that was the only thing keeping me in. So now it's 2015. So from 2012 to 2015, I started researching Islam. It didn't happen overnight. It took 4 years of academic study. At this point, I had graduated from college. I had 2 graduate degrees. I became a professor, an accounting professor at a local California community college. I was pushed out. Okay, so I was working at the tow truck company. My family starts to hire Ahmadis to work there who are unqualified. They start saying, how come this guy doesn't go to Jummah? The Ahmadiyya Masjid is a mile away. Why is he not going? They start to hate me because I'm a big person in the company. Well, I'm the only person that's qualified to do every job in the company. No one else is like that. So they start spying on me, spying on my computer. They tell my family, this guy is an anti-Ahmadiyya. He's going to the famous Amdi.org discussion board and reading and writing. So all of a sudden, my job gets eliminated. They didn't fire me. They just eliminated my position. So luckily, that's why I say Allah has guided me. In that era, I got hired as an adjunct accounting professor. Now I'm tenured, right? But almost 10 years ago, so I moved away from the company. I started having personal problems with my ex-wife, and it's the same thing. Why don't you go to the masjid? This is the complaint on me, and I just can't believe it. Why am I doing?
So just real quickly, sorry to interrupt you, but it seems more like it's not so much the religious, but it's more about this cultural thing. Where like, oh, you're betraying a culture where, you know, everyone's gonna be talking about us, and what are they gonna say, or how can we show our face if you don't go there, or if you say this stuff? It's not so much like, because I mean, what I'm gathering is if even the Ahmadi leadership at the center doesn't even know what you're talking about, and they're supposed to be the leaders of the community, for me, it seems like a big just cultural sentiment. You just get together, you donate money to the big dog, you have some dinners, you know, you have a couple of speeches to make you feel good about yourself, and you're doing some great important work in the world. You know, it's a weekend social justice warrior, and then you go back home and you slave away and make more money for the big dog in England. Right? I mean, it's just how I look at it.
That's exactly what it was. And that's what I questioned when I was 11, 12 years old. I said, why are we doing this if there's no benefit in it? You know, it doesn't change people. It doesn't help people. Why are we doing this? How come we can't just be regular Muslims? Why? Because it's a tight-knit community. So I know all the Ahmadis on the West Coast. They all know me personally. Trust me, brother. We played American football. All the young generation that's my age, they all knew me. I used to call myself the fastest Punjabi boy ever because I'm, just some of the banter, right? So they all know me. They all knew me. They all still know me. They all hate me now. So anyhow, 2013, 2014, 2015. Unfortunately, I love this girl, but it didn't work out. I got the divorce, and then I said, "Well, why am I still in Ahmadiyya?" So I remember going to my father's house and telling him I quit Ahmadiyya because Mr. Brahman was taking opium and lied about it. I discovered this. He was on. Just look at his picture. He can't even open his eyes. Like he's on the street we'd say he's on one. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I noticed that like there's a famous picture of him where he's wearing a turban and he's got like this almost like sleepy, lazy eye, bro. Like it's just like I don't know what he's doing, bro. I mean, he looks honestly. I don't want to talk about people's appearances, but the man looks wicked to me, bro. I mean, in Arabic we have a saying called firasa. Like when you see somebody, you can see like their outer and just kind of get an idea of what. I'm not saying judging, but you just get an intuition about someone. And I look at this guy and I'm like, bro, this is and like they're touting this picture like this is like a blessed picture of a guy. I'm like, yo, I see a cursed man in this picture. Like, what are you talking about, bro? Like he looks straight up like he's in a different world right now.
Right.
And
like I was saying, from India, it was diamonds, opium, and sugar. And he lied about his opium use. He said he never used it for anything. He said he was diabetic, and he was like, I still refuse to take it. But I found out he was telling the truth. He was on opium probably his whole life because of his medical ailments, which immediately makes all his salat haram. Right? It doesn't count if you're on opium. And they used to eat it. So since he used to eat opium, the number one side effect was diarrhea. So that's what he ended up.
So let's talk about that for a moment. So I heard first of all that was not only did he die from that, but apparently this was even his own mubah, like his challenge, his mubah, like where he made a challenge to other Sunni alim or ulama and said that if one of us are lying and made your bowels get cursed or something like this, why don't you talk about that? Because a lot of people in the text were wondering, did he actually die on the toilet or did he die in a puddle of his own, duty? Because I mean, there's two different. Like I mean, he didn't really die on the toilet. He died of the bowels. Well, okay, what does that mean? Like, I mean, when I hear that, the guy crapped himself to death. I mean, the reason I laugh is because I had a hamster when I was like 9 years old. No, I think 11 years old for a science project. And the thing died. I left him some apples, I think, when I went away for the weekend, and he ate it and like pooped himself to death. I think whatever happened. And so I'm thinking, like, I just remember, like, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, like, he's pooping himself to death. Like, I mean, I know, I try not to do that because if I'm going to have an outreach to the Ahmadiyya, I don't want to be okay, dude, your man just, blanked himself to death. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to go out and say that to him because it's offensive, but I know that when things get heated, people throw that in their face and be like, yo, the guy you believe in died on a toilet. You know what I mean? So, so why don't you talk about that for a moment?
Sure, brother. And I've covered this in detail on my blog. I found the most rarest of references. In 1908, when he died, the people who wrote his obituary said he died of cholera. They couldn't admit to this. This is what was written. They've never confessed to it. I found a story by his doctor, Dr. Mirza Yaqub Beg. Dr. Mirza Yaqub Beg says as he showed up just minutes before Mirza Ghulam Ahmad died, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was sitting on a joki. A joki is a wooden portable toilet.
Okay. Wow. So he was on a toilet then. So it's a bedpan. If you were teaching to get up, it's a bedpan.
Right, but the bedpans didn't exist. They had the wooden portable toilet, and he was defecating, and he was fine. He was healthy. 12 hours before that, he had this attack. And yeah, look at those beautiful eyes, brother. And
look, he's on one, bro. He's stoned right now, bro.
Before I forget,
purple drink.
Brother, before I forget, they were so embarrassed they edited his eyes in 1924 and made him look bigger. You can go on my blog, search 1924. So see, they colored in his eyes to make him look more open. I couldn't believe it.
You know what this reminds me of? You know how you go to the Christian Jesus, there's a Chinese Jesus, there's a black Jesus, there's like a white Jesus. They try to make you.
Yeah, brother, it's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, he died of cholera, and when you die of cholera, you die doing diarrhea and vomiting. Your bowels basically go out. That's how he died. They didn't deny it until later, until 1923. And even in 1923, when his sons wrote the story, They said, yeah, he had this, he had diarrhea problems his whole life. Well, that's a dead give off. He's eating opium because that's the number one side effect of eating opium. Years later, people started shooting the heroin into their arm. You bypass the stomach. See what I mean? So
right, and it's funny because people who shoot it in the arm, they actually taking opium the other way. You get like that can lead to like all kinds of gastrointestinal issues. Some people experience constipation by injecting, but ingesting it, you get like diarrhea because your bowels, your inside just can't handle it. Your body's trying to get rid of it. And so yeah, that totally makes sense. Why on top of him having cholera, taking opium, I mean he'd be on the bathroom all day long. I mean there's no way he'd be able to get out.
Right. So as I go back and I check all my references, he spent the majority of his time locked up in bathrooms. And I said, brother, I mean, I'm just connecting the dots here, brother. And I'm like, he can't lead prayer. How come he can't lead prayer? He can't control his bowels.
Well, he was literally in the shit house, like literally. I mean, there's no other to say.
In his small little toilet, they turned it into it's still there in Gabion. I can't remember what they call it now. I think they call it the Bathroom Dua. This is where he pray at. Bro, he's locked up in there all day, laying down. Now, what does opium do to humans? If you saw the pictures in China, you're laid out all day. You can't move.
You can't move, bro. Yeah, you can't move. Like I mean, just go look at the opium epidemic in America right now. You see people when they're high, they when they're nodding off, they can't do nothing. They don't know what they're doing. They're not in control of their body. All they can do is just sit there and they're in their own world. Like it's very common for them to defecate themselves, to just even if they're smoking, to burn some stuff. Like I'm sure you've seen the crackhead not off. Like they're hitting that stuff and they don't know what world they're in right now.
Right.
And
right.
so that would explain to also why maybe he was starting to talk this nonsense about him, how he was married and he was this and he had these visions and God knows what else he was talking about. I mean, I bet you he might have said a lot more other crazy stuff, but it probably was too crazy it was probably too crazy to put in there. They're like, yo, this is way crazy for us. You can't have this in there, bro. And I'm sure the British didn't calculate this because they probably thought, you know what, the Muslims, they didn't really know about Islam either. They probably thought, you know what, this might be convincible for them because, let's be honest, there was a Hindu element mixed into some cultural Islamic stuff in India at that time. So maybe they would have understood it. But I'm sure the British probably held down some of the other crazy views that he would have had, about, while being high on opium. I mean, it's just, you can't deny that you start having, delusions of grandeur when they're taking these drugs.
Right. And even in his childhood, his teachers were opium addicts. So he grew up around it. He'd be in his room all day. And look, the virus has taught us humans don't like to be stuck indoors. All right. I'm in the house bored and I'm in the house bored. Right?
Yeah, that's why we're doing this right now. This is about communication. You know what I mean? Like we have to be able to.
This guy's in the room all day. He's good. He's got men massaging him all day and women massaging him all day. He's living the life. His right arm was broken, so he couldn't write since he was a kid. He would dictate. He used scribes. So as I go to my dad's house, I tell him all this. He kicks me out of his house, says never come back, etc., etc. And I quit Ahmadiyya in late 2015. I'm researching Islam. And my thing is, I like Muhammad Ali, the boxer. I like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I don't want to slander them. I like Talib Kweli. I like Mos Def. I like Mike Tyson. And I see all these things, and I'm like, why should I take? I mean, everything Amity said is a lie. Why should I take their information and call Islam bad? I couldn't do it, brother. There was something in me that said, no, this is not true. I started reading Professor Jonathan Brown. I started reading other academic sources on Islam. And I said, no, Islam is not what the Ahmadis say. They're wrong. So in about 2016, 2017, I said my Shahada at a local Islamic center in front of some witnesses. Alhamdulillah, I became a Muslim. I created the blog. I started social media. I started all these things. Immediately, one of my cousins, he's like a double cousin, he starts screenshotting my Instagram and calling me an alcoholic, calling me a drunk, trying to
So
slander.
the slandering starts.
So okay. Let me go back a little bit. As a Muslim, we don't challenge people to death. We don't make fun of how people died. Brother, everyone dies. It's, when Biggie got shot in L.A., he peed on himself. When everyone goes, it's not nice. Well, the only reason we bring it up is because Mirza Ghulam Ahmad brought it up. He had a revelation that he'll humiliate all of his opponents. So this is what Ahmadis is saying about me. They're trying to humiliate me. There's a bunch of guys. There's a guy named David Stengel. He's made fake Twitter accounts about me, saying I'm an alcoholic, I drink wine, etc., etc.
Well, here you go. Well, first of all, well, let's say let's say that was true. I'm not saying that's true about you. I assume that alhamdulillah you don't do a thing. Let's say that's true. That a Muslim who drinks alcohol is still better than an Ahmadi who believes in a fake prophet. So even if you want to say that about a Muslim, he's still a Muslim.
He's still a Muslim. Alhamdulillah, that's exactly what my mind said. I'd rather be a struggling Muslim than be an Ahmadi.
But just to be clear, that's all just rumors. That's not true, right? I mean, they're just saying that. I don't want to have the wrong impression and be like, oh yeah, he's confirming it. No, he's categorically denying that he does that stuff. This is just a slander campaign against him because this is what cults do. So when Scientologists leave Scientology, they send people to stalk them, right? When people leave Ahmadiyya, they send people to stalk them because this is their dawah. They have to protect their dawah because the secrets are now out. The man who knows the finance and the accountant and all this stuff is out now. So that makes them very nervous, right? Because now,
so they said, my family members said, if I had just quit and went about my life and said nothing, they wouldn't have done anything. But they said, why are you burning the house down? And I had to think,
that's not true though. That's not even true though, because they were cutting you off just for asking a question. You should have told them, look, if you didn't cut me off for asking a question, the house would have never came down. We would have built the house together.
Right. And look, they know of my academic ability. Brother, I'm a little bit of both. My favorite rapper was a guy named Razkaz. You ever heard of Razkaz? Right, he was street and academic, right? So that was my guy. I was sort of like him.
So speaking about that, I'm about to bring another Pakistani guy on. His name is Lazarus. I'm sure you might know him.
I saw him on TV, brother. You got him?
Yeah. We've been talking. I'm gonna get him. I love him because he's intellectual. I love people that come from the street and they're smart too, because that's a dangerous combination. Because you got a little bit of the street, you got a little bit of the hood.
That's what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
So I watch Vlad TV. I wish one day I could be on there and give commentary. I also am like a novice hip hop historian. I love hip hop. I grew up on it, and that's why I had family members during the virus make videos about me saying I'm not even a Muslim. I'm faking being a Muslim. So this all goes back to the humiliation aspect. If you leave Ahmadiyya and you're vocal about it, they will try to humiliate you, defame you, persecute you, and do all these things to you. And it came from Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, and he was seeking to humiliate all of his opponents. Even now, brother, there's a YouTube channel, Amdi Answers, run by this guy named Razi Qudrat, and he's trying to humiliate, and he'll take sound bites from Islamic scholars and twist them and try to humiliate them and expose them. And we told him, brother, why are you guys doing this? Why didn't the Khalifa tell him to stop? Because secretly the Khalifa is supporting him. This is what they do.
So just so you guys know, I bet you there's some undercover Ahmadis in there right now, just kind of listening around. So if you guys listen, you're not going to win this war. There's like 1.7 billion of us, right? You guys are like a minority. Like right now, he's a Muslim, right? And so I'll get him on every single major channel that I know, and they'll just call you out for the bluff that you guys are doing. So either you come clean or look like the liar that you are. Right? It's just the same thing. People say I'm a bit confrontational, but I enjoy that. For me, like I take the approach of like Umar ibn Khattab, I want to be in your face about it. If I see BS, I'm gonna just call you out about it because that's just my nature. Right? And I look at you also. I'm hearing your story. It reminds me of the story of Salman al-Farsi, where he just kept questioning. He kept questioning. And that's sincerity, because it's not easy to change. People make fun of people who change their belief. But if you're changing the belief for a right reason, that's a sign of a sincere human being, because that means you're growing. People don't realize that if you're not changing for, I mean, not every change is good, but if you're changing in a positive way, that there should be no shame in that.
Right.
Because culture, all that stuff is secondary. Right? Even in Islam, even within Sunni Islam, even if you have certain positions that you have at one point be younger or whatever, and you're learning and you're studying, you're like, hey, I'm gonna adjust my position within the framework of the Sharia. That's no problem, guys. That's part of being a human being. It's part of growing and adapting, to learning, right, and growing. So if anyone wants to, oh, he used to be Ahmadi, who cares? I mean, that's. I mean, the Sahaba, some of them used to be pagans. I mean, what's the point? You know, I mean, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of Islam, in order to guide people to the truth. And it just so happened that, I mean, I feel like your work is important because Lahori Ahmadis are like almost there. Like they're like right there. They're like a low hanging fruit. You can just take a little push. Why would you abandon it? You don't believe in a drunken opium master, so might as well just be done with it altogether. You know what I mean? Like, so I mean,
once they find out that Mirza Ghulam never led Salah, he never gave a khutbah Jummah, and here's the argument that he gave in his lifetime. He said, someone asked, hey, how come he doesn't lead the prayer? Right? He said, oh, but when Isa was going to return, he would tell the Mahdi to lead the prayer. He would never lead any prayer. So that's the argument. So, brother, again,
but wasn't he the Mahdi then? But wasn't he the Mahdi too?
Exactly. His argument collapses because, hey, don't you also claim to be the Mahdi? So now what? So he doesn't have anything to say. And this is where the trouble happens. This is what happened in 1974 at the train station. They're giving out their pamphlets, making their arguments. We give a counter argument, and they refuse to listen. Now they're confrontational. Now they start arguing. A fight happens, right? And now they're crying persecution. So that is the main issue.
So just to be clear, so that I don't want to really take it out of context. I mean, but you're not saying that every single act in Pakistan that way. I mean, I'm sure there's some legitimate. I mean, there's some Ahmadis who do nothing and they've been victims of violence. Right? You're not in any way condoning that. I mean, yeah, right, okay, yeah. I just want to make sure because
So I'm saying the majority of the persecution happens because overzealous Ahmadis are trying to convert people. Brother, you're in Pakistan, 99% Muslim. Why are you trying to convert anyone to anything? We've already achieved it. You know what I mean? You bring dawah too. A Muslim?
Yeah. And it's funny because they claim freedom of speech, but in their proposed khilafah, if they were to have one, there would be no freedom of speech, essentially.
There would be no freedom of press. In British India, there was no freedom of speech, the freedom of press. So where they came up, there was none of that. It was colonialism.
So if anyone wants an idea of what a potential Ahmadiyya Khilafah would look like, all we have to do is look at British India.
Exactly. The Press Act of 1913. The British, if you published anything against the British, it was curtains for you. In fact, in the Ahmadiyya newspaper, they called the Queen of England as the Khalifa of the Muslims.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I heard that some people even said that the Queen of England is related to the Ahlul Bayt. Like some of our friends on the Shia side, they will say that she's a member of the Prophet's family. Yeah. So why is it? I noticed this attachment to colonial masters. Like they will do anything to seek approval from these people, and I feel like as Muslims, why do we even care about what they think about us? Like what I have is far more superior than what they could ever provide to me. Why would I ever feel inferiority? And I feel like this entire idea of religion and that they have, or this Ahmadiyya movement was born out of an inferiority complex to the British people, and like to the rule over them, and to seek their approval and say, hey, you know what? Hey, we can be Muslims that are cool with you too. We can be just like how you want us to be, and as long as you reward us, we're gonna be. We know that it's almost like they did not trust that God would provide for them, so they wanted to appeal to masters to provide for them, and they adjusted their religion and everything. They sold as the Quran said, they sold the religion for a meager price, for some cheap price, and now they think that they're getting the benefit of that by being close to these colonialist governments.
Right. So let me explain in some additional academic detail. The Mughal Empire used Hanafi faith. There were no sects. The Ottoman Empire used Hanafi faith. There were no sects. The British came into Saudi Arabia and invented Wahhabism, and they did jihad against the Ottomans. The same thing was happening in British India. The British didn't want Muslims to use the Hanafi fiqh. Wahhabism is a pick and choose of the Hadith. Now you can be all over the place. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was a Wahhabi before he created Ahmadiyya. In fact, his second marriage, his nikah, was read by the top Wahhabi in India. They were called Ali Hadith. They were given a different coloring. But the British wanted Iraq because of the oil during World War One. So the British played all these games and broke up Islam and created all the sects and divisions in Islam. And then they defeated the Mughal Empire, the Ottoman Empire. That was the plan.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, brother, I speak about mine and some things. So I think we might have a little bit different on this here. Here's the thing: I think I want to make it clear because I see. I know the talk, the Turkish history gets a little bit, touchy for people. But I will say this much: the British had a hand in the Saudi state that was being created, like Lawrence Arabia. We know that, right? But the Ottomans also had a point where they were dealing with the secular young Turks, where they were talking about annexing. If you notice, like they gave away the Levant, like Lebanon and Syria, to the French and the colonialists. And so a lot of the Arab states were wondering, wait a minute, what's going to happen to the Hijaz now, right? Because if, God forbid, it falls in the hands of British, because they saw what happened in India. So naturally, the Arab tribes of Arabia, they began to, kind of also show their pushback. Now, I'm not going to get into a whole argument about this, but I personally feel like this, that while it is true that the Hanafis are one madhahib and majority adopted by the Ottoman Caliphate, which is normal, but I mean, you could still be in the Ottoman Caliphate, you could still be a Hanbali or Shafi or Maliki, and there were schools that were there for that. And I believe Muhammad ibn Wahab for the most part was a Hanbali, like that, right? That's what it was. Now, sure, did he had his critiques of the Ahl Sufiya, maybe people like who were at different madhab, and that's a whole different story. But I still think that Mirza Ahmad was far from a Wahhabi. Like he might have agreed with some Ahl Hadith people, maybe on certain issues, but Ahl Hadith would be the first to call him a kafir and be like, hey, dude, like you are, you're saying people are
right. So that's exactly what happened. But those were the group of people he was hanging out with. As soon as he started claiming prophethood, they did the fear of him and they were done with it. So that's as far as it went. So that's where it came from. It's way more.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't want to tell the whole dialogue. We can talk about that at a different time. But like I said, I mean, I think there's a lot of nuances around even the life of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad that a lot of us don't know, and I think that's why your work is important. 1,600 essays on the man himself, and we're talking about probably from his lineage to his birth, to how he grew up, his education, his health, his religiosity, his death, the legacy after that, like what he left behind, what's truthful in that, and what's not, what was added even later by his own movement aside. And I think, I'm sure you cover all that within those 1,600 essays that you have. Am I correct?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. There's still more. Like I just wrote the essay on chapter 62, verse 3. So I'm still filling in the gaps of things that I haven't covered. And I'm writing better essays. Then I'll go back. I'll spend the whole day just editing 20 different essays with new information. As new information comes in. So I spend a lot of time writing. I type pretty fast. And that's part of my academic work because I'm teaching a lot of online classes, so I'm in discussion boards all day. So this is part of my lifestyle. The virus killed my basketball lifestyle, so now it's more sitting down stuff. But alhamdulillah, brother, alhamdulillah, I came a long way. Allah guided me the whole way, and got some luck running for Congress and in Virginia, as we all know.
The thing is, like I look at him and I'm like, yo, you know what? I can't. I mean, when I look at that, like I feel like he's trying to be like this next Malcolm X. You know what I mean? Like in a way where he's trying to be the representation of Muslims in the media and in front of the camera. And I'm like, bro, you do not represent me, man. Like you don't, you like, you're not like anything around me.
And he's been ordered to do this by his Khalifa. It's one of their political plays.
I don't doubt it because it seems to me that they get cozy with the rulers, and we have a hadith about that within our own tradition that any scholar or person who cozies up with that ruler, it's not exactly a thing that you should be encouraging, and that they can be, there's punishment for these kind of people who aid, people who are corrupt rulers and who get involved in corrupt politics. Because you and I both know, man, like you can't get involved in American politics without getting dirty, bro. Like it's a dirty game, right? There's no clean politician out there, right? So it is what it is. Okay, so I think here it goes. Here it goes. 1 second. I just want to show you something, brother. See, this is what we're talking about. Look at this. Yeah, I mean, like really, like these are the kinds of people that we did. I think it's like a Hindu guy who's mad because I don't know if you know it's a drama going on that this guy, basically an atheist, he like basically put up a picture of some Hindu goddess with like an erotic picture, and he's an ex-Muslim, and the Hindus still think he's a secret Muslim. So like they're coming to my channel now to get mad at the atheist guy who's crapping on their God. Like, why are you blaming me, you stupid Hindu? Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand that stuff. Anyway, but let me just say this one thing to you about politics in America. Though. It's a very dirty game, and me personally, my feeling is I don't want to make a whole discussion about that. My personal feeling is that rather than putting effort into a candidate, Muslims should be able to create a what you call a lobby or a super PAC that will be able to that influence based on the money they get. So let's say that if somebody was a candidate or they won the election, I would say, hey, you know what? We want immigration reform, or we want a holiday for Eid, right? So here we're willing to donate as long as that's one of the things on the table, right? And once that we're willing to use our lobbyists or petition, and that's how it happens really in the U.S. Congress, right? I mean, once people get elected, they don't really care what their constituents say, right? They don't really care about that. Right. So I'm not a fan of this whole political thing, but ultimately, I feel like that, if he wants to go and do that, I don't think in large the Muslim Sunni community is going to. I mean, let's just be honest. We don't really like them.
We're not going to support him. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Yeah. So he's not going to come close. He's not going to get elected. He's in a Republican-heavy district, and that's funny to me. That's funny to me that he lives in that area that's Republican heavy, but you want to be elected to Congress. If you lived in a Democrat heavy area, it might happen. But since you don't choose to live with the diversity, how are you going to get elected? You know what I mean? So
exactly. Yeah. So there's a question there. You plan on writing a book? Since you are writing essays, or we can see a compilation of memoirs of something like we can see something like that.
Alhamdulillah, brother. Alhamdulillah. As soon as I figure out, all I gotta do is copy and paste because I've already written everything that I needed to write. So it should be easy, inshallah. It's coming soon, and let's see how it goes, brother. I'm just excited to. I just started making videos about a month ago actually. So I hadn't came out with the videos until I was viciously attacked during the virus by some family members. So out of respect for my parents,
you on YouTube or just videos on Twitter?
On YouTube also, Ahmadiyya Fact Check Blog YouTube channel. I started it 3 or 4 years ago, but I just started adding my content. Like for example, I went over chapter 3 verse 48, chapter 3 verse 55, and I cover all the Ahmadi centric verses of the Quran. I covered the Adam and Eve topic and how Ahmadis deny the creation theory, and how Ahmadiyya is based on pre-Einstein science. So they didn't believe in the mirage. They didn't believe any of this was possible. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad said that humans could never get to the moon.
Oh wow!
Okay. Yeah. So So he had never seen flight. He had never even seen a hot air balloon in British India. He never knew of any of these things. Now we know with Einstein science, it's all possible.
Okay, well, I mean, I looks like there's a lot of work to be done. You know what I mean? So, inshallah, if any way that I can help you with talking with any scholars, I mean, alhamdulillah, through the podcast and joking around, I'm around good brothers that'd be willing to, if you ever need to, check something within Islam and you need some, academic, scholarly from, from Loretta, you need some help with that, I will definitely be able to plug you. It's a pleasure to be able to see a brother like you who's able to now kind of get it, kind of exposed, because we always hear from the outside, right? There are Muslims who are not Ahmadis, who never were, but they read the books. But people always say, "Oh, well, they just hate Ahmadis," right? But now it's kind of like someone who's been tried and tested as an Ahmadi, been involved in it, the inner workings, and then what's interesting is you didn't just become a Sunni after you left Ahmadiyya. It took you some time to research, I think 2 or 3 years. I'm sure the transition was easier because you were familiar with a lot of the concepts, but you just didn't jump right into it. So no one could say, "Oh, you just jumped into." He was a Sunni the whole time, all along, right? Like, no, it kind of took you a while to come back in, and that must have been a scary time period, right? Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to be a complete atheist? Am I going to be? What am I going to do at this point? If that's false, what's real? You know what I mean? Like, that's a test.
Right. And most ex-Ahmadis in the West end up becoming agnostic atheists. There's a huge Reddit forum called the Islam/Ahmadiyya a Reddit forum, and there's hundreds of ex-Ahmadis who are now agnostic or atheists. I respect them. I got love for every. I'm Punjabi, so I know a lot of Sikhs. You know what I mean? I got love for everyone. Doesn't matter what religion you are or what your beliefs are. So most ex-Ahmadis fall into that, and I almost fell into it too. The moon landing is
they're coming out now. The earth is flat, brother.
Yeah. And okay, brother. Even if the moon landing was fake, we know that we orbited the moon, so we've left the earth. The other, you see what I mean? But
anyway, so what's the best way that people can get in contact with you if they want to get in touch with you to the show or ask questions about Ahmadis, or if there are any Ahmadis listening to the show that are now wanting to have a conversation about this further? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, my Twitter handle, let me see if I can post it. I'm on social media like heavily, mostly Twitter. And I answer questions all day, brother. I'm on the cutting edge of the research work in Ahmadiyya. It seems like because not all the Mirza Ghulam Ahmad books are in English yet. I think about 60% are in English. And we keep finding new stuff that is so shocking, that is so confusing. It's just really bad. So the research work continues. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad at one point called Allah like a tendril, which is a leopard, or like an octopus. So and it all makes sense. If you're on opium, brother, you might come up with these. And like, there's a famous book by a Britisher who took opium and wrote about it, and he said he got the craziest dreams. It was just out of control. So I'm fully available to answer questions. I'm on social media all day. And I'm willing to learn more and talk to more Muslims like Dr. Han, aka Lazarus, and other Muslims, most deaf. I think Yasin Bey is his name, Talib Kweli. I met Abdul Rauf, who was a Shia basketball player.
Yeah, Mahmoud bin Rauf, yeah. He was the Colin Kaepernick before Colin Kaepernick. You remember that? I grew up in that era. And he didn't want to stand up for the anthem, so they suspended him And they made, and so they finally allowed him to stand, but he would make a dua every time there was the national anthem. And I was thinking about starting a campaign where the NBA needs to go back and apologize to him for that, because now they're all apologizing for all the stuff they've been doing now. They need to go back and apologize to him for that moment, because he lost a lot out. I remember that. Like, and it's crazy, like, how, now 20 years later, you know what I mean? Like, that stuff is out there now. But there's a lot of Muslims out in America that are doing positive things, man, like that you don't know about, like, and of course, like, especially in the hip hop scene, there's people that are there. Loon recently got released from prison out, and he was jailed up for that too. There's what's his name? Beanie Siegel, who's a Muslim as well too. He's out there. I mean, a lot of people like this, inshallah, we ask Allah, guide everyone to what's good for them and to keep them away from any harm, and to put them on that path that, keep that is good for them, and that does not put them into haram at all. But yeah, I mean, there's if there's anybody we can get you in touch with, I'll try my best to do it, inshallah. And
I've worked with CARE, Muslim Day at the Capitol. I've been the faculty advisor for the MSA on many campuses. I've led young Muslims through the many troubles in the last 3 or 4 years. I'm still new myself, learning, because Ahmadiyya doesn't teach you the respect aspect of Islam, the behaviors, and etc. I say alhamdulillah a lot more now than I did when I was in Ahmadi. I was never really taught that as a kid.
Or like, hey, thanks, thank you.
Oh yeah, that's just, I'm the fastest. Now it's alhamdulillah, right? So I'm still learning a side of Islam. I've learned the Ahmadiyya centric side of it. Now I'm learning the other side of it. So I'm still, my journey continues. I almost had a nikah last year, but it didn't materialize.
So we ask Allah to give you a spouse that is the coolness of your eyes and that soothes your heart. Allahumma ameen. Qulu ameen ya Jama'ah. Everyone in the group say ameen for that he gets married to a spouse that is that is suitable for him and that is coolness to his eyes. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
So other than that, I think we're good to wrap this one up. I think we had almost 2 hours with you on the show, and I never do a 2-hour show, and this was like engaging. I feel like a time flew by, but I'm sure you gotta get back to your kids and stuff, so I don't want to keep you too long. But it was a pleasure to have you on the show, and you are welcome back anytime. And if you ever need, I'll definitely be reaching out to you on Twitter. I got you added, and we'll be in touch, inshallah. Do you have any final thoughts you want to say?
The final thing is, alhamdulillah, only Allah guides. And a lot of my family members are stuck in misguidance. Through some of my videos, they've learned that Mirza Ghulam never gave up a khutbah. He never led prayers. They've learned a lot, and hopefully, inshallah, they realize the fraud that they've been wrapped up in. And my main goal is to get them to come to Islam, or at a minimum, leave Ahmadiyya. It might not be a month before you come to Islam, it might be 5 years. It's up to Allah. That's Allah's business. But let's get them out of Ahmadiyya to financial freedom. I go to the local masjid. The basket goes around. No one asks, are you paying or are you not paying? And help your local community. They don't even have to be Muslim. Where you live at, in the city that you live at, it's your first responsibility. Help the homeless, help the poor. We all pay taxes, and inshallah, they'll come to Islam eventually. So that's my final word, brother.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Abdul Ghani, thank you. Jazakumullah khair for all the super chats. People who donated to super chat, we appreciate that. For those of you that don't know what's going on, I enabled the super chat recently. So if you guys ever want to get a comment highlighted, or you just want to support the channel, you can throw a super chat in there. Make sure you go over to the brothers channel, Ahmadiyya Fact Check blog, the YouTube channel. So there'll be you can go subscribe to that channel. Let's build that up so that he can get a following, inshallah, and that he can obviously continue the good work that he's doing. For those of you that are not members now, we have 2 options: the membership on Patreon, and now YouTube has now offered a membership option. So I just set that up. If you look at the YouTube channel, there'll be a little join button. If you want to support the effort and you want to join the different tiers, go check it out. If you can't, and you know, I know it's COVID time and stuff, and I don't, you know, want to cause anybody hardships, or your dua is enough for the channel. If you can't, don't feel bad. I love to have you either way, no matter what. We'll find a way, inshallah. But I think that's a wrap for now. So, inshallah, we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Hello, hello. Welcome to Youth for Idiots. I'm Katie Halper. We paid cash for my card.